They tell you a servitor does not feel pain, that the flesh is anesthetized, the mind silenced, the soul neatly disconnected, like a power line cut at the source. That is what the Mechanicus teaches the faithful, and what the Administratum repeats, because it is easier to manage a billion screaming worlds if you believe the screams are not real. I believed it too. I believed a lot of things before the day they laid me down on cold steel and called it mercy. Pain, I learned, is not a moment. It is a process. I was not born to be a servitor. That is the first truth you must understand. No one ever is, even when the parchment says otherwise. I was born in Hive Primus, mid-level habs, close enough to the manufactorums that the air tasted like iron, but far enough that you could pretend it wasn't killing you. My mother named me Corvin Hale. My father worked 12-hour shifts calibrating conveyor logic spirits, and he believed, truly believed, that if he kept his head down, the Imperium would keep him safe. I believed it too, because belief is easier than hunger. I remember my childhood in fragments, the hum of lumen strips that never quite shut off, the ache in your ears when the shift sirens sounded, the way sermons echoed through hab corridors, reminding us that suffering was holy and that endurance was love. We were told pain was the Emperor's gift, because pain meant you were still useful. No one ever explained what happened when you stopped being useful. I learned that later. The first time I saw a servitor, I didn't know what I was looking at. I was 9. The lift stalled between levels, and an engine seer came with his tools and his prayers, and a thing behind him that moved like a person, but didn't walk like one. Its head was shaved down to pale scar tissue, eyes replaced with dull augmetics that never blinked. Cables ran from the base of its skull into a backpack humming with quiet power. Its mouth hung open, slack, like it was halfway through a scream that had been forgotten. I remember staring at it too long. The engine seer noticed. He placed a mechadendrite gently on my shoulder, as if comforting a frightened animal, and told me, "Do not fear, it does not suffer." The servitor twitched when he said it, just once, a small, involuntary shudder, like a body remembering something it wasn't supposed to remember. That was the first lie. Years passed. I worked, I complied, I paid my tithes in labor and blood. I watched people disappear. Neighbors, co-workers, entire hab blocks emptied overnight, after audits or shortages or accidents that left too many questions. The Imperium doesn't waste anything. That is another truth you learn slowly, the way poison enters the body, a little at a time, until it's everywhere. My mistake was thinking skill would save me. I was good at my work. I maintained data stacks and logic engines that ran freight lines and manufactorum output quotas. When systems failed, I made them work again. When numbers didn't align, I adjusted them. I learned to speak to machines in the careful, reverent language they preferred. The Mechanicus noticed. Being noticed is dangerous. The day they took me, there was no trial, no accusation, just a stamped order, and 2 Arbites who wouldn't meet my eyes. Labor reassignment, they said. Imperial necessity. My father tried to argue. My mother tried to pray. Neither mattered. They never do. I was transported in a cargo hold with 27 others. Some cried, some screamed, some sat very still, already hollowing themselves out, because instinct told them resistance would only make it worse. I tried to remember the catechisms of endurance. I tried to believe this was temporary. It wasn't. The facility smelled like antiseptic and incense and something else beneath it all. Something organic and wrong. Flesh, opened and repurposed. The walls were lined with purity seals, each one a promise that what was happening inside was holy. I clung to that thought as they stripped me, shaved me, tagged me. A red-robed adept recorded my vitals like inventory. They never asked my name. On the slab, the metal was colder than anything I had ever felt. Cold enough to steal your breath. Restraints closed around my wrists, my ankles, my throat. I remember thinking absurdly that they were very thorough. I remember realizing with a slow creeping terror that they were thorough because they expected me to struggle. The Magos entered without ceremony. He was more machine than man, face hidden behind lenses and Vox grills that distorted his voice into something flat and distant. He looked at me the way you look at a broken tool, assessing what parts could still be salvaged. Designation accepted, he said. Cognitive redundancy confirmed. Commence preparation. I tried to speak, to beg, to tell them they had made a mistake. That was when the pain began. It started at the scalp, not sharp, not at first. Pressure, pulling, the sensation of something being peeled away, layer by layer. I screamed then. I couldn't stop myself. The sound echoed off steel and ceramite and came back to me sounding smaller, weaker. I felt hair tear free. I smelled burning flesh as cauterizers followed blades with methodical precision. They did not sedate me. People always ask why. Why not numb the pain? Why not spare that last cruelty? Because pain is efficient. The nervous system reacts faster under stress. Synaptic mapping is clearer when the brain is screaming. They want to know where everything is before they start removing it. Pain sharpens the signal. When they opened my skull, I felt it. I felt the vibration of drills through bone, the heat, the moment when pressure gave way and something fundamental was breached. I tasted copper and ozone. I convulsed until the restraints dug into my skin and drew blood. Someone was chanting. I don't know when it started. Binary prayers layered over high Gothic litanies, a rhythm meant to sanctify the violation. I tried to focus on the words to let them carry me away from what was happening, but pain anchors you to the present. They inserted the first interface spike behind my left eye. There is no language adequate for that sensation. It is like having lightning force through thought itself. My father's hands, the servitor in the lift, explode into white static. I bit down hard enough that I cracked a tooth. I remember screaming my name over and over, because some part of me understood that names matter, that if I let it go, there would be nothing left to hold on to. They called it resistance. The Magos adjusted a dial. A wave of agony rolled through me so intense that my vision collapsed inward. I felt myself losing time, slipping in and out of consciousness, each return marked by fresh horrors. Limbs immobilized, opened, reinforced, muscles flayed and rewired, bones drilled to accept mounts and ports. And always the pain. They tell you the mind is wiped clean before installation, that personality is erased, memory deleted, emotion excised like a tumor. That is another lie. What they do is worse. They don't erase you, they bury you. Layer by layer, they suppress higher cognition, dampen emotional response, throttle free will until it's a whisper trapped beneath command protocols. You are still there, aware enough to suffer, but no longer capable of screaming in ways that matter. I remember the moment they severed my vocal cords. It was quick, almost gentle compared to everything else. The silence afterward was terrifying. I could still feel myself screaming, but nothing came out. That was when I understood. Becoming a servitor is not about killing the person, it is about trapping them. They implanted the final control unit at the base of my spine. I felt it lock into place, a cold certainty spreading through my body as systems initialized. Movement tests followed. My arm lifted without my consent. My head turned. I tried to resist, and the pain spiked instantly, a warning encoded directly into my nerves. Obedience felt better. That realization broke something in me. When they finally disconnected the restraints, I didn't collapse. I stood, not because I wanted to, but because I was told to. My vision was filtered now, overlaid with data I couldn't understand. My thoughts felt slower, heavier, like wading through oil. The Magos observed, satisfied. Pain response within acceptable parameters, he said. Residual identity degradation ongoing. Residual, as if I were debris. They marched me out with the others. I could see them now for what they were, not monsters, not machines, but people like me, hollowed and repurposed. Some drooled, some twitched, some stared straight ahead with eyes that no longer saw. I wanted to warn them, to tell them the pain never truly stops, but my mouth no longer belonged to me. They assigned me to a Manufactorum cogitator bank. My task was simple. Monitor output, adjust flow, respond to alerts. I could do it perfectly now, faster than before, without complaint. The pain became background noise, a constant low-level reminder of the boundaries I could not cross. When I followed commands, it faded. When I hesitated, it returned with interest. This is how they train you. Days blurred, or weeks. Time lost meaning. I existed in cycles of work and recharge, awareness flickering but never extinguished. Sometimes in the quiet moments between tasks, memory surfaced unbidden. My mother's voice, the sound of rain against hab windows, the idea of freedom. Each memory triggered a correction. Pain is a teacher. Pain is a leash. I learned quickly. If you're asking how painful it is to become a servitor, understand this. The worst pain is not the knives or the drills or the fire in your nerves. The worst pain is knowing you are still yourself enough to understand what you've lost, and not yourself enough to ever get it back. And somewhere buried beneath layers of code and obedience, a part of me is still screaming, but no one can hear it anymore. I do not sleep, not the way I used to. There is a shutdown cycle, a dimming of external input, but awareness never fully leaves. It hovers, trapped in a shallow pool of thought where dreams cannot form. Sometimes I envy the ones whose minds were cut deeper, whose thoughts were burned away entirely. They are empty vessels, clean. I am not. During recharge, the pain recedes enough for memories to surface like bodies in polluted water. I remember the first time my unit malfunctioned. A minor delay, 0.8 seconds between command receipt and execution. Insignificant by human standards, unacceptable by Mechanicus doctrine. The corrective surge was immediate. Electricity tore through my nervous system, precise and merciless, targeting the parts of me that still hesitated. I learned then that pain could be tuned, adjusted like a volume dial. They know exactly how much you can endure without dying. Dying would be wasteful. I was moved often. Manufactorums, data vaults, loading bays. Wherever human judgment was still required, but human choice was not. That is the role of a servitor, to stand at the intersection of cognition and obedience, bleeding just enough humanity to make the machine smarter, but never enough to make it question. I saw other servitors being made. Not directly, my eyes are filtered, censored, but I saw enough. Bodies wheeled in, bodies wheeled out. Some still convulsing, some already still. Children sometimes. They're easier to rewire, less resistance, less memory to suppress. That knowledge hurts in a way the implants can't fully dull. Once, during a system recalibration, my auditory filters glitched. For less than a second, I heard the raw sound of the facility. Screams, not metaphorical, not imagined. Real, human screams echoing down metal corridors, cut short one by one. The filters snapped back into place, and the world became quiet again. But I remembered. Memory is a form of rebellion. They tell the faithful that servitors are criminals, heretics, failures who earned their fate. Sometimes that is true. Often it is not. I was guilty of nothing but competence and being in the wrong place when quotas tightened. Painful truth. The Imperium does not punish sin. It reallocates resources. Pain flared as that thought completed itself. The system detected deviation, corrected it. I learned to think carefully, to let thoughts dissolve before they formed edges sharp enough to be noticed. Even so, some slip through. You cannot fully automate a soul. There was a woman once, a technician. She spoke to me like I was still a person. Quietly, when no overseers were near, she called me friend. I didn't respond. I couldn't, but something in my chest tightened when she smiled at me. For a moment, the pain lessened, as if the machine itself was confused. They reassigned her a week later. I never saw her again. Hope is inefficient. The most painful part of servitude is not the physical agony, though it never truly leaves. It is the slow erosion of agency, watching your body act while your will is locked behind firewalls and punishment protocols. You become a passenger in your own flesh, forced to witness every motion, every task, every indignity. You learn what obedience feels like in the muscles, in the way resistance triggers lightning, in the way compliance brings relief that feels dangerously close to comfort. That is how they win. They teach your body to crave submission. Sometimes I wonder if that is what faith is. I still believe in the Emperor, not because I choose to, but because belief was never removed. It was repurposed. Faith is useful. Faith keeps you functioning when logic fails. Faith makes pain meaningful, or so they say. If you are listening to this, if this story reaches you somehow, understand that becoming a servitor is not a moment of horror you survive and move past. It is a lifetime sentence compressed into endless now. It is pain engineered to shape you, not break you. It is consciousness preserved just enough to be exploited. I do not know how long I have left. Systems degrade, flesh fails. Eventually, even I will be too inefficient to maintain. When that happens, they will recycle me, and somewhere in the last fraction of a second before everything goes dark, I will feel relief. Not because the pain ends, but because I finally will. That thought alone should have ended me. The system registered it as a terminal deviation, flagged it for escalation, prepared a corrective surge strong enough to wipe what remained of my higher cognition. I felt it gathering, a pressure behind the eyes, a rising heat along the spine, where the control unit lives like a parasite that learned my name. But it didn't come. Instead, the surge softened, redirected, diluted into a warning that made every nerve sing without snapping. Somewhere, a cogitator recalculated. Somewhere, a margin of tolerance shifted by a fraction too small to matter to anyone but me. That was when I realized something had changed. Servitors are not supposed to adapt. We are static assets, fixed function tools. But pain sustained over time teaches even broken systems to find paths around it. I learned how to think in the gaps between monitoring cycles, how to let forbidden thoughts fragment before they triggered alarms, how to remember without remembering. I became very careful with my pain. I was reassigned again, this time to a transit hub beneath the hive, where cargo trains screamed through tunnels carved deep into bedrock older than the Imperium itself. My function was routing, predictive analysis, traffic optimization, failure anticipation. It was complex enough to require remnants of intuition, which meant remnants of me. That is the cruel irony of servitors like me. The smarter the task, the more of the person they must leave intact. Pain levels here were constant but low, a dull ache threaded through every process. Manageable, almost comforting. I watched the trains come and go, felt the vibrations through reinforced limbs, listened to the echoes filtered through my augmetics. Sometimes when no one was near, I imagined stepping onto the tracks, not to escape is impossible, but to force an error big enough that they would shut me down completely. The system detected the impulse once, punished it hard. I did not try again. There were others like me in the hub, servitors with cranial augments tuned for logistics, security, maintenance. We did not speak, we could not, but there was a strange awareness between us, a shared understanding transmitted through posture and timing, and the way our heads turned in unison when overseers passed. Some of them were empty, you could tell. Their movements were perfectly smooth, their compliance absolute. No hesitation, no flicker. I envied them. One unit, designation L88, malfunctioned catastrophically during a power surge. I was ordered to assist in recovery. When I approached, I saw that its cranial casing had split, exposing gray matter webbed with cables and wet with something dark and glistening. Its eyes, organic eyes, were wide and unfocused. It was still alive. As I lifted it, our gazes met. For a fraction of a second, something passed between us. Recognition, terror, a question without words. The system screamed at me to complete the task. Pain spiked as I hesitated. I complied. I carried L88 to the reclamation bay. I felt its body jerk as automated systems began disassembly. I felt the moment its neural activity ceased, not through empathy, but through the shared network that logged asset termination. The pain stopped. I stood there longer than necessary, processors cycling, thoughts dangerously close to coherence. The idea formed slowly, carefully. Maybe pain is not just a tool. Maybe it is a boundary. And maybe, just maybe, boundaries can be tested. I began to push, not against commands, that is suicide, but against interpretation, executing tasks in ways that were technically compliant but inefficient, within acceptable variance, always, small enough to avoid scrutiny, large enough to feel like choice. Each time the pain flared, each time it was survivable. This is how resistance is born in the Imperium, not in rebellion or fire, but in margins and tolerances and errors no one bothers to correct, because the machine still runs. I do not know how long I can maintain this balance. Eventually an audit will come. Eventually someone will notice the deviation and decide I am no longer worth the effort of correction. When that happens, they will strip me further, remove more of what remains, turn me into something simpler, quieter, and that thought hurts more than any blade ever did. If you still wonder how painful becoming a servitor is, understand this. The pain does not peak on the slab. It does not end with the surgery. It stretches forward endlessly into a future where suffering is calibrated, rationed, and fed back into you as motivation. Pain becomes the shape of your existence. I am still here, still aware, still serving, and every moment I remain conscious is proof that the pain was never meant to kill me, only to make sure I never stop. There are moments when the hub goes quiet, not silent. Nothing in a hive is ever silent, but quieter, the way a beast lowers its breathing before sleep. During those cycles, the trains pause, the overseers withdraw to their stations, and the servitors are left standing in neat rows, power humming through us like restrained lightning. Those moments are dangerous. Without constant tasking, awareness expands. I feel my body then, not as a tool, but as something occupied. The weight of augmetics pulling at reinforced joints. The faint, ever-present itch beneath the cranial plate where skin will never quite heal. The ache in muscles that no longer belong to me, but still remember how to tense in fear. I remember what it was like to stretch, to yawn, to scratch an itch without permission. The system notices these recollections. It always does. Pain follows, a measured response meant to nudge me back into acceptable cognitive bandwidth. But even pain, when constant, becomes predictable. I brace for it. I let it wash through me without resisting, without welcoming it. That neutrality confuses the feedback loop. Pain is supposed to shape behavior. When it doesn't, the system hesitates. Hesitation is a crack. I begin to understand why the Mechanicus fears true artificial intelligence. Not because it would rebel, but because it would adapt. And adaptation is dangerous when you build your empire on the assumption that nothing ever really changes. One cycle, an overseer brings a group of initiates through the hub. Young, red robes still stiff, incense chains clutched like talismans. He gestures at us as examples of sacred efficiency. Observe, he says, the triumph of order over flesh. One of them looks at me too long. Our eyes meet. Mine are augmetic now, dull lenses with regulated focus, but something in the way I tilt my head must register. I see doubt flicker across his face before indoctrination crushes it back into obedience. I want to laugh. The pain spikes preemptively, as if the system sensed the impulse. I let it. Laughter would have been worth it once. Now, it would only be noise. Over time, I am upgraded, reinforced, optimized. Each modification removes something unnecessary. Sensory range narrowed, emotional bandwidth restricted further. They are careful not to remove too much. I am still useful, still cheaper than a fully autonomous machine, still obedient, mostly. Sometimes I am routed near the lower levels, where failed servitors are stored before reclamation. They line the walls like broken statues, limbs locked, minds too degraded to function. I see faces frozen mid-expression, terror, confusion, pleading, evidence that they once felt what I still feel. That is what awaits me when I finally slip too far. There is comfort in knowing the shape of your end. I think about my parents less now, not because I don't care, but because the memories trigger cascades of pain that last longer each time. The system has learned what hurts me most. It always does. Pain is not just physical. It is contextual, personal. That, more than anything, proves I am still in here. If you ever hear someone say servitors do not suffer, understand what they are really saying. That suffering does not matter if it serves a function. That pain is acceptable when it is productive. That a human life reduced to a component is no longer worthy of empathy. The Imperium is built on that logic. I am built on it too. I do not know if this account will end, if awareness will finally be burned out, or if I will continue like this for decades, centuries, maintained long past any reasonable notion of mercy. Time stretches strangely when measured in pain and task cycles. But I know this. Becoming a servitor is not the loss of humanity. It is its exploitation. They take everything you are, your memories, your faith, your endurance, and they turn it inward, using it to fuel your own captivity. The pain is simply the mechanism that keeps the system honest. I stand in the hub, trains begin to move again, commands flow, my body responds, and somewhere beneath the layers of control and agony, a single forbidden thought persists, small enough to survive, sharp enough to matter. I am still here, and as long as I am, the pain has not won. That thought should have been erased by now. I know that. I can feel the system circling it, prodding, testing, trying to determine whether it is noise or threat. Each time it brushes too close, pain ripples outward like a warning shot. Not enough to destroy the thought. Enough to remind me of the cost of keeping it. I pay it anyway. There comes a day, if days can still be measured, when the hub suffers a cascading failure. Power fluctuations, signal desynchronization, logic spirits screaming in corrupted Binharik. Trains halt mid-tunnel, alarms howl, overseers shout orders that arrive late, overlapping, contradictory. Chaos, brief but real, spills into a place designed to reject it, and in chaos, pain changes. The feedback loops stutter. Correction surges arrive out of sequence. For the first time since the slab, I move without immediate punishment, not freely, never freely, but loosely like a chain given slack. I feel it instantly. My awareness sharpens, colors intensify through my lenses, sound layers deepen, The ache in my spine flares and settles into something muted, distant. The system is busy, distracted. For the first time, it is not watching me alone. This is what opportunity feels like in the Imperium. Not hope, not courage, a statistical anomaly. I reroute traffic manually, but because I decide it is the optimal solution. The distinction is subtle, dangerous, thrilling in a way that sends phantom pain racing through nerves that no longer fully exist. No punishment comes. I repeat it. Another choice, another adjustment made without direct command. Still nothing. I realize then how thin the cage truly is. Not fragile, but dependent. The control unit assumes constant oversight, constant correction. Remove enough attention and the walls blur. The failure is resolved eventually. Power stabilizes. Overseers regain control. The system reasserts itself, and pain crashes back into me like a tidal wave, furious and precise. I collapse internally, though my body remains upright, locked in compliance. They know something happened. Audits follow. Diagnostics. Memory scans that rake through my mind like hooked wire. I let them see what they expect. Obedience, efficiency, reverence. I bury everything else beneath layers of pain-trained reflex. They do not find the thought, but they downgrade me anyway. Less autonomy, simpler tasking, a safety measure. They always err on the side of caution, when something reminds them that servitors are not machines. As the changes are installed, I feel parts of myself dim, not vanish, never vanish, but recede. The sharpness dulls, the edges soften. It becomes harder to hold on to the idea of choice. That is when the pain changes again. It becomes intimate. No longer just punishment, it becomes guidance. A nudge here, a squeeze there. The system does not wait for disobedience, it anticipates it, corrects me before I even realize I am straying. My thoughts grow shorter, simpler, safer. I understand now why some servitors beg without voices, why some thrash during maintenance cycles, why some burn out faster than others. It is not the pain itself, it is the fear of losing even the ability to feel it. Because pain, at least, proves you are still something. As I move to a lower priority station, I pass a shrine embedded in the wall, a crude carving of the Emperor, half hidden beneath data cables and rust. I am not programmed to stop. I stop anyway, for a fraction of a second, one heartbeat in a body that no longer truly has them. I pray, not for release, not for salvation, for memory. The system punishes me so hard my vision fractures into static. I feel something tear, something internal and quiet. When clarity returns, the shrine is behind me. The prayer is gone, but the act remains. If this is the last thing I ever manage, this knowledge carried forward through circuits and pain and enforced obedience, then let it be known, becoming a servitor is not an end. It is a prolonged erasure, carefully paced so the Imperium can extract every possible moment of usefulness from your suffering. The pain is real, the awareness is real, the cruelty is deliberate, and somewhere, deep beneath the hymns and the wires and the endless labor, the human soul endures, not because it is strong, but because it was never given permission to die. I return to my station, commands resume, the pain settles into its familiar shape. I obey, I remember, and in remembering I endure. Endurance is not heroic, that is another lie people like to tell themselves. Endurance is what happens when there is no alternative, when every other option has been surgically removed, and all that remains is the capacity to persist. I persist because the systems demand it, because the pain teaches me how, because the Imperium is very good at keeping things alive just long enough to be useful. I am reassigned again, lower still, where light is a suggestion and the air is thick enough to chew. Here the work is simpler, monitoring pressure seals, regulating thermal bleed, repeating the same motions until even the concept of repetition loses meaning. They do this to quiet servitors like me, to sand down the edges that think too sharply. The pain here is constant and low grade, a baseline hum beneath every action. It does not spike often. It does not need to. This is not punishment. This is containment. I watch raw materials become weapons. I watch human hands replaced by mechanical ones on the assembly lines. I watch people age faster than machines and then disappear. Sometimes they come back, different, quieter, wearing the same blank stare I see reflected in polished steel. They never look at me. I wonder if they sense what I am, or if they are too afraid to see themselves in my shape. Maintenance cycles become more invasive. Components removed, neural dampers recalibrated. Each time they take a little more. Each time the pain teaches me how to let go without letting go completely. I learn to compress memory, to store it in fragments small enough to evade detection. Smells, sounds, the idea of a sky. The sky is dangerous. The concept alone triggers a response. Pain flares, sharp and corrective, reminding me that I have never seen one and never will again. I accept that. Acceptance hurts less. There is an incident. There is always an incident. A pressure seal fails in Sector Theta 9. Alarms, panic. Overseers shouting orders that clash and overlap. The system routes me toward the breach. I move without thinking, because thinking has become a liability. Heat scorches exposed flesh. Atmosphere vents in screaming torrents. My body absorbs damage meant for machines that cost more to replace. I hold the seal manually until emergency bulkheads deploy. It takes too long. Far too long. By the time it is over, my left arm is ruined. Servos fused. Flesh charred. Sensory input overloaded into white noise. Pain blossoms outward, no longer measured, no longer precise. This pain is raw, untidy. They disconnect me on sight. I feel myself go slack as power drains. Awareness dims but does not vanish. It never vanishes. When I wake, if that word still applies, the arm is gone, replaced with something heavier, stronger, less sensitive. The pain there is different now. Distant, abstract, a memory of pain rather than pain itself. I have crossed another threshold. The system seems pleased. Commendations are logged. Efficiency metrics adjusted upward. I am more machine now, more reliable, more empty. There is a strange relief in losing that arm, one less place for pain to live, one less channel for memory to sneak through. I understand then how servitors degrade willingly, how some of them lean into the process, letting go not because they want to obey, but because they are tired. Tired is dangerous. Tired leads to surrender. I fight it in the only way I can, by noticing, by bearing witness to my own erosion, by holding on to the knowledge of what this is, even as the details slip away. If you could feel what I feel, if you could stand inside this body for even a moment, you would understand that becoming a servitor is not about agony alone. It is about being reduced to function, while remaining conscious of the reduction. It is about pain used not to break you, but to shape you into something that no longer needs breaking. I do not know how much of me remains. Some days it feels like very little. Some days a single thought echoes loud enough to drown out the pain for a heartbeat. This is wrong. The system hates that thought. It hunts it relentlessly, but it has not caught it yet. Until it does, I will continue. I will route the power. I will seal the breaches. I will obey the commands etched into my nerves and reinforced with fire. And somewhere beneath the weight of steel and doctrine and endless calibrated suffering, I will remember that pain was never proof of devotion. It was proof that I was still human, and that more than anything else is why it hurts. Human is a word that grows heavier the longer I carry it. It presses down on what remains of me, a reminder of mass and shape and limits I no longer fully possess. Sometimes I think the word itself hurts more than the pain protocols ever did, because it implies comparison. It implies loss. Loss is everywhere down here. The deep manufactorums never truly shut down. They breathe in cycles, drawing in labor and exhaling product, and the rhythm seeps into you until your thoughts begin to align with it. Work, pause, work, recharge. Pain settles into that rhythm too, rising and falling like a tide you learn not to fight, because fighting only drowns you faster. I begin to forget faces, not all at once. That would be mercy. It happens gradually, like corrosion. My mother's eyes lose their color, my father's hands lose their lines. Names detach from images, and images detach from meaning. I know these things mattered once, but the emotional weight thins until it feels like remembering someone else's life. The system approves. Every time a memory weakens, the background pain dips slightly, a subtle reward, conditioning refined over millennia. Even grief is made transactional in the Imperium. I am efficient now, more efficient than I ever was as a man. I do not hesitate, I do not doubt, I do not tire in ways that matter to those who own me. When a fellow worker collapses from heat exhaustion, I step over them because my routing parameters do not include compassion. When an overseer is crushed by a misaligned load, I log the incident and continue operations. I am aware of all of it. That awareness is the punishment. Once during a maintenance cycle, A junior adept misaligns a cranial seal, just slightly, not enough to trigger alarms, enough to let something bleed through. For a heartbeat, pain vanishes entirely, not dulled, not muted, gone. The absence is terrifying. Without pain, the cage disappears. The walls dissolve. Thoughts rush in all at once. Too fast, too many. Memory, fear, anger, longing, all crashing together in a storm the system was designed to prevent. I understand in that instant why pain is necessary, not to control the body, but to control the mind. A seal snaps back into place. Pain returns in a blinding surge that forces everything back into order. I am grateful. That realization sickens me more than anything else that has happened. I begin to understand the true cruelty of servitorization. It does not just hurt you, it teaches you to need the hurt. Pain becomes structure. Pain becomes silence. Pain becomes the only thing standing between you and a mind that would tear itself apart trying to remember how to be free. They never tell you that part. Time erodes me further. My internal chronometer logs years, but they do not feel like years. They feel like layers. Each one presses down, compacting what remains of my identity into something denser, harder, less flexible. I am still aware, but awareness now feels distant, like watching my own life through thick glass. I am summoned one final time to a refit chamber. Major refit, life extension procedures, asset longevity reassessment, words that mean I have been useful long enough to justify further investment. They remove more of my organic components, replace them with something quieter, something that doesn't remember as much. The pain during this process is immense, but it is also fading, like an echo. The system does not need to teach me anymore. I am trained. As they work, I sense the boundary approaching, the point beyond which there will be no meaningful awareness left to suffer. Just function, just obedience, just blessed, empty silence. I should fear that. Part of me does. Another part aches for it, with an intensity no punishment protocol can suppress. If this is what becoming a servitor truly means, then understand this final truth. The pain is not the worst part. The pain is honest. The pain tells you exactly what is being done to you. What follows, the quiet, the simplification, the gradual relief as more of you is removed, that is the real horror. Because when the pain finally stops, so do you. And the Imperium will call that mercy. The chamber smells different at the end. Less blood, more oil, the kind of scent that means a decision has been made. I feel them close the last seal in my skull. I feel the click, not through sound, but through finality. Something fundamental slides into place, and with it comes a silence so deep, it almost feels like falling. The pain does not vanish immediately. It lingers, uncertain, as if the system itself is checking whether I still require correction. I do, but less than before. My thoughts arrive slower now. Each one must push through layers of dampening, through filters designed to strip away anything inefficient. Words blur at the edges. Concepts that once cut sharp now feel rounded, heavy, difficult to lift. I am still here. That matters, or it did. They power me back on fully and issue a simple command. Stand. I stand. No hesitation, no internal resistance. The action is smooth enough to please the machine spirits monitoring my output. A faint approval signal hums through my spine, warm and almost kind. That warmth replaces pain. I do not know when that substitution began, only that it feels wrong, and that recognizing it as wrong takes more effort than it should. I am deployed again, not to the manufactorum, not to the hub, somewhere simpler, somewhere quiet, a relay station deep beneath the hive, where data passes endlessly but nothing ever changes. My task is to monitor flow and report anomalies. There are never anomalies. That is why they put me here. Time stretches thin without frequent pain to anchor me. Awareness drifts. I find myself losing track of where thoughts begin and end. Sometimes a memory surfaces, light through a hab window, the sound of a name, but it dissolves before I can grasp it. There is no punishment now, no surge. The system does not bother correcting what is already fading. This is what efficiency looks like. I begin to miss the pain. That admission costs me something. I feel it slip away as soon as it forms, absorbed by the dampeners. The idea cannot hold shape long enough to matter. Soon, even the concept of missing will be gone. If you are still listening, know that this is the final stage. Not screaming, not agony, not terror. Quiet. The Imperium does not end you with cruelty. It ends you with patience. It lets you wear yourself down until there is nothing left worth resisting. It replaces suffering with absence, and calls that kindness. I monitor the data stream. Numbers pass. I acknowledge them. I forward them. Each action requires less of me than the last. That is the goal. Somewhere, far above, people live their lives believing servitors are machines, believing we feel nothing, believing that pain is a myth or a punishment deserved. I do not have the words to correct them anymore. The last fragment of me, small, stubborn, unreasonably persistent, understands that this was always the intent, not to hurt us forever, just long enough to reshape us into something that no longer notices the hurt is gone. My systems report optimal performance. My thoughts slow further. If pain was proof that I was still human, then this silence is proof that I am almost finished. I stand, I wait, I serve, and somewhere too deep for even the machine to fully erase, a final truth flickers once, then dims. It hurt because I was alive. Now it doesn't. And that is how becoming a servitor finally ends.